Air brakes use compressed air to make the brakes work. Air brakes consist of 3 different braking systems in one. The service brake system applies and releases the brakes when you use the brake pedal while driving normally. The parking brake applies the brakes when you use the parking brake control. Finally, the emergency brake system uses parts of the service and parking brake systems to stop the vehicle in the event of a brake system failure. There are multiple parts to an air brake system, and we will cover them all here. The air compressor is connected to the engine through gears or a V-belt and pumps air into the air storage tanks. This compressor can be cooled by air or by the engine cooling system. It may also have its own oil supply. If it does, this needs to be checked during your pre-trip inspection. The easiest way to find the air compressor in the motor is to look for the air governor, which is usually a silver cylinder with a black cap. The governor controls when the air compressor will pump air into the air storage tanks, which are used to hold the compressed air. When the air tank pressure rises to about 125 psi, the governor stops the compressor from pumping air. When the tank pressure falls to around 100 psi, the governor allows the compressor to start pumping again. The air storage tanks hold all the compressed air produced by the air compressor. They will hold extra air in case the air compressor stops working. Compressed tanks usually have some water and some compressor oil in them, which can be bad for the air brake system because water can freeze and cause brake failure. For this reason, air tanks should be drained completely from the drain valve in the bottom. You must drain the tanks yourself at the end of each day unless the truck is equipped with an automatic drain, in which case the water and oil are automatically released. The automatic drains come with electric heating devices that help prevent freezing of the automatic drain in colder weather. A safety release valve is installed in the first tank the air compressor pumps air into. This protects the tank and the rest of the system from too much pressure. This valve is usually set to open at 150 psi. Some air brake systems have an alcohol evaporator that puts alcohol into the air system to help reduce the risk of ice in air brake valves and other parts. It is your responsibility to check the alcohol container and fill it up as necessary. Daily air tank drainage is still needed to get rid of water and oil. If the safety valve releases air, something is wrong and you should have the fault fixed by a mechanic. Just like in a car, you apply the brakes by pushing down the brake pedal, which adds more air pressure. Releasing the brakes lets some compressed air go out of the system, so the air pressure in the tanks is reduced. Foundation brakes are used at each wheel, which have the following parts: brake drums, shoes, and linings. Brake drums are located on each end of the vehicle's axles. This is what the wheels are bolted to. The braking mechanism is inside of the drum and consists of brake shoes and linings that are pushed against the inside of the drum, which cause friction and slows the vehicle. Pushing the brake pedal lets air into each brake chamber, which pushes the rod out and moves the slack adjuster. This turns the S-cam. The S-cam forces the brake shoes away from the drum, which lets the wheels roll freely. Another type of air brake system is called the wedge brake. In this type of brake, the brake chamber push rod pushes the wedge directly between the ends of 2 brake shoes. This shoves them apart and against the inside of the brake drums. Depending on the type of wedge brakes you have on your vehicle, they can either be self-adjusting or require manual adjustment. There are also disc brakes, in which the air pressure acts on a brake chamber in the slack adjuster. With disc brakes, the pressure turns the power screw. The power screw clamps the disc or rotor between the brake lining pads of a caliper. Wedge brakes and disc brakes are less common than S-cam brakes. There are also different types of gauges in an air brake system. All air brake vehicles have a pressure gauge connected to the air tank. These gauges tell you how much pressure is in the air tanks. There is also an application pressure gauge, which shows how much air pressure you are applying to the brakes. This gauge is not on all vehicles. If you notice you are increasing application pressure to hold the speed, this means the brakes are fading and you should slow down and use a lower gear. A low air pressure warning signal is required on vehicles with air brakes. This must come on before the air pressure tank falls below 60 psi, though this can be 80 to 85 psi in buses. The warning is usually a red light, but a buzzer may also come on depending if your vehicle is equipped with one. The final piece to the air brake system is the stoplight switch, more commonly known as the brake light. This acts as a warning to following drivers when you apply the brakes. The air brake system uses an electric stoplight switch that is operated by air pressure. Some older vehicles have a front brake limiting valve that's controlled from the cab and has two settings, normal and slippery. When in the slippery position, the limiting valve cuts the normal air pressure to the front brakes by half. These valves are used to reduce the chances of the front wheels skidding on slippery surfaces, but they actually reduce the stopping power of the vehicle. If you need normal stopping power, make sure the control is in the normal position. Most vehicles have automatic front wheel limiting valves that reduce the air to the front brakes. The parking brake control in the cab allows the driver to release or set the parking brakes. A leak in the air brake system will cause the springs to put on the brakes if the air pressure drops to a range of 20 to 45 psi. When the low air pressure warning light and buzzer first come on, bring the vehicle to a safe stop right away while you can control the brakes. For spring brakes to work properly, they have to be adjusted correctly. If they are not, neither the regular brakes nor the emergency or parking brakes will work right. In newer vehicles with air brakes, you put on the parking brake by pulling a yellow diamond-shaped knob on the control panel out. Push that same knob in to release them. Use the parking brakes whenever you park, but use caution. Never push the brake pedal down when the spring brakes are on. If you do, the brakes could be damaged by the combined forces of the springs and the air pressure. In some vehicles, a control handle on the dashboard called a modulating valve may be used to apply the spring brakes gradually. This valve is spring-loaded, so you have to feel for the brake in action. But the concept is simple. The more you move the control lever, the harder the spring brakes come on. The purpose is so that you can control the spring brakes if the service brakes fail. If you need to park with a modulating control valve, move the lever as far as it will go and hold it in place with a locking device. When main air pressure is lost, the spring brakes come on. Some vehicles, such as buses, have a separate air tank, which can be used to release the spring brakes. This is so that you can move the vehicle in an emergency. One of the valves is a push-pull type and is used to put on the spring brake for parking. The other valve is spring-loaded in the out position. When you push the control in, air from a separate air tank releases the spring brake so you can move. When you release the button, the spring brake comes on again. There is only enough air in a separate tank to do this a few times. Therefore, plan carefully when moving, otherwise you may be stopped in a dangerous location when this separate air supply runs out. You've likely heard of the anti-lock braking system, or ABS, which is used in addition to your normal brakes. This is a computerized system that prevents your wheels from locking up and keeps you in control during a hard brake. ABS does not increase or decrease your normal braking capabilities and only activates when the wheels are about to lock up. Under normal braking conditions, your vehicle will stop as it always has. ABS is only activated when a wheel would normally have locked up because of over-braking. The Department of Transportation requires that ABS be installed on all truck tractors with air brakes built after March 1, 1997. All other vehicles, like buses, converter dollies, and trailers, manufactured after March 1, 1998, are required to have ABS. Tractors with ABS have a warning light on the dashboard. Trailers will have a warning light on the rear of the trailer, on the driver's side, or on the front of the trailer. Most heavy-duty vehicles use a dual air brake system that has two separate air brake systems with a single set of brake controls. In this scenario, the primary system typically operates the regular brakes on the rear axle or axle, while the secondary system operates the regular brakes on the front axle and possibly the rear. Before driving a vehicle with a dual air system, you should allow time for the air compressor to build up a maximum of 100 psi pressure in both systems. Any warning lights or buzzers that turn on should shut off once the air pressure rises to greater than 60 psi. If the warnings come on as you are driving, this means that the air pressure has dropped below 60 psi and you should stop right away and safely park the vehicle. Any warning indicates that the air system is low in pressure and either the front or rear brakes will not be operating fully, which means that it will take longer to stop. If you drive a vehicle that has air brakes, there are more items to check when you are doing a pre-trip inspection. When checking the engine compartment, determine if the air compressor is belt-driven. If so, check the condition and tightness of the belt. The belt should be in good condition with no wears, tears, or frays, and not excessively loose. You should also check the manual slack adjusters on S-cam brakes. This process requires you to park on level ground and chuck the wheels to prevent movement. It is essential that you turn off the parking brakes and wear gloves so you can move the slack adjusters. If a slack adjuster moves more than about an inch with a push rod attached to it, it needs to be adjusted. Vehicles with extra slack can be more difficult to stop. Brakes that are out of adjustment are the most common issue found in roadside inspections. Brake drums and discs must not have cracks longer than half the width of the friction area. Linings must not be loose, soaked with oil or grease, and should not be dangerously thin. All mechanical parts should be in their correct position and not broken. While doing this part of the inspection, also ensure that the air hose is connected to the brake chambers and that they aren't cut or worn down. Some rules for air brake checks were implemented in July of 2015. The new procedure begins with a parking brake check. With a truck in a low forward gear and the parking gear set, attempt to move the truck. If the truck doesn't move, the parking brake is functioning as it should. After this, check the service brake by releasing the parking brake and moving the vehicle forward at less than 5 miles per hour. Grip the wheel tightly and press the brake pedal. The truck should not pull in any direction. If it does, the brakes are out of alignment. Now it's time to test the applied air loss. Turn the engine off, but keep the key in the ignition. Press the brake and hold it down. While doing this, look at the air gauges and determine the PSI loss. For a Class A vehicle, there should be no more than 4 PSI lost in 1 minute. Class B vehicles cannot lose more than 3 PSI. To test the low air warning, begin fanning the brake pedal until the air gauges read 60 PSI. At this point, as previously mentioned, the low air warning light and/or buzzer should come on. Continue fanning until the air pressure reaches 45 to 20 psi, at which point the brake valves should pop out. For this test, watch the valves, not the gauges. If somebody suddenly pulls out in front of you, your natural response is to press on the brakes. If there's enough room between you and the vehicle and you use the brakes correctly, this is a good response. Remember to brake in a way that keeps the vehicle in a straight line and allows you to turn if it becomes necessary. One method you can use is the controlled braking technique. With this method, you apply the brakes as hard as you can without locking the wheels. Your steering movement should be small, but if you need to make larger steering adjustments or the wheel is locked, release the brakes and reapply as soon as you can. The other option is the stab braking technique. With this option, apply your brakes all the way and release when the wheels lock up. As soon as the wheels start rolling again, apply the brakes fully. It can take up to 1 second for the wheels to start rolling after you release the brakes. If you reapply before the wheels start rolling, the vehicle won't straighten out. Remember, emergency braking doesn't mean that you should press on the brakes as hard as you can. With hydraulic brakes, the brakes work instantly. However, with air brakes, it takes a little time. Sometimes a half second or more for the air to flow through the lines to the brakes. For this reason, the total stopping distance for vehicles with air brake systems is made up of 4 different factors instead of the usual 3. In addition to perception distance, reaction distance, and braking distance, you also have to account for brake lag distance. The air brake lag distance at 55 miles per hour on dry pavement adds about 32 feet. This means that 55 miles per hour with good traction and braking condition, the total stopping distance is more than 300 feet. If your brakes are fading or failing, you will have to apply them harder to get the same stopping power. Doing this over and over again will only worsen the brake fade to the point where you may not be able to slow down or stop at all.